"It's not hunting," rasped Commander Vorik, leaning forward over the biosurge table. "It's feeding, and it's learning faster than we designed." The observation deck of the Varnock orbital lab trembled as the creature below rammed through another containment pod. Shards of alloy scattered like dry leaves, but the predator was already past, dragging a thrashing synthetic decoy in its clawed grip. Its triple-jointed legs flexed under the gravitational modulator, adapting to pressure shifts mid-pounce. Inside its skull, neuroclusts flickered with high-yield absorption. Every motion, every heat trace, every chemical plume committed to adaptive behavior. 3 colonies had already vanished, one dissolved into nutrient sludge, one left barren by airborne mutagenics, and the third simply gone, its biosignature flatlined. No distress signals, no remains. No resistance. The predator hadn't left survivors, only pattern recognition trails. Each time faster. "Deploy the next one," Vorik ordered, his mandibles twitching. "Let's see what it does with a human outpost." An aide hesitated. "Thera 9 is unarmed, scientific only." "Exactly," Vorik hissed. "They'll either flee or die. Either way, it'll reinforce the myth." Below, the beast finished eviscerating the last decoy. Its flesh regenerated where acid splash had melted dermal plates. The Varnock observers murmured as the thing inhaled through its gill vents, sniffing for movement, then crouched. Ready? To be launched. Within the hour, it was sealed inside a drop capsule and hurled toward the interspine corridor. The Varnock didn't watch the re-entry vectors. They began drafting the next press release. Captain Rhys Tarkinen stood with one palm against the reinforced viewport of Thera Benign. His eyes tracked the distant flicker of something inbound. No transponder, no heat bleed, no signature on the orbital traffic logs. Just displacement in the static grid. That was enough. He didn't blink. "Protocol, Fallow," he said. The technician beside him nearly choked on his stimsic. Rhys nodded once. "If that's what I think it is, we're not defending, we're studying." The station's corridors shifted as commands propagated. Airlocks sealed. Drones retracted, thermal cores rerouted. Hundreds of false heat sources activated in staggered intervals, mimicking biometric signatures. Even water flow in the pipes was adjusted, erratic, rhythmic, mammalian. Rhys turned from the window, jaw clenched. His face bore the residue of years not spent behind desks, scar just under his temple from Yatari skirmishes, a set in his shoulders that no civilian could mimic. He wasn't stationed here for minerals. He was placed for unpredictability. "Pull back all active research staff," he said, stepping into the control module. "Route them into Block E and shut down outer sections entirely." Rhys muttered, "Dr. Kelv, the project's behavioral analyst. You realize this is a kill mission?" "No," Rhys replied. "It's an autopsy that hasn't happened yet." He keyed the interface. No virtual screens, just manual toggles and analog feedback. The system operated under isolation rules. No uplink, no remote view. The creature would find only echoes and distractions. Thera 9 wasn't built to repel attacks. It was built to map responses. The drop capsule hit atmosphere like a comet, wrapped in ablative shell plates and reactive gel that flared off in streaks of chemical fire. The predator emerged mid-descent, claws latching onto scorched cliff rock as it pulled itself into the canyon basin that flanked the outpost. No guards, no alarm, not even movement. It advanced. A thermal pulse to the left, a false trail mimicking human body heat. The predator bounded toward it, flaying through a wall with talons that shredded carbon fiber like wet bark. Inside, a mannequin-shaped dummy smeared with biolure. It lunged, bit, swallowed. The proteins weren't organic. They were loaded with K9 gamma, a compound designed not to kill, but to interfere. It bonded with hybrid organs, disrupted glandular rhythm, induced minor confusion, harmless to most, fatal in pattern over time. The predator moved again, another heat pulse. More bait. This time a corridor flooded with pseudo-breath cycles and hormone traces. Reese watched from the secured nerve center. His team sat around him, dead quiet. He leaned into the mic. Trigger Chamber 6, Vent Sequence Delta. A hiss. Coolant fog spilled through a duct and lured the beast further into the maze. It didn't hesitate. It didn't question. It only moved forward, exactly as it was built to do. The apex predator had no predator of its own. Until now, high above, in low orbit, the Varnock ship monitored telemetry. They noted no gunfire, no transmission, no explosive resistance. "They haven't even run," said the comms officer. "This is beneath insult." Commander Vorak didn't respond. He focused on the creature's biofeed. Pulse rising, glandular response spiking, adrenaline cycle distorted. It wasn't accelerating. It was fragmenting. "Is it feeding too fast?" one of the lieutenants muttered. Vorak narrowed his eyes. "Impossible. We engineered it to accommodate." The beast on Thero 9 twisted mid-run, slamming into a corridor wall and raking it in frustration. Its breath came uneven. Its balance faltered. Pull up the last chamber it entered. The footage showed flickering heat projections, layered scent trails, and a protein dispenser marked only by crude human symbols, red triangles, paired dots. "That's not bait," Vorak said slowly. "That's a funnel." Back on Thera 9, Riss moved between observation nodes, tapping control panels that adjusted corridor pressure and lighting. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicked. Dr. Kelv whispered, "It's exhibiting instability. Should we sedate it?" "No," said Riss. "Let it spiral. It needs to believe this is its choice." He keyed another switch. Room 8 dimmed, revealing a surgical floor already prepped. The predator, now limping slightly, followed the bait right into it. Reese looked at the viewport one last time. His fingers hovered over the command that would lock the chamber and flood it with the final stage of the neuroinhibitor. He pressed it. Behind him, Kelv asked, "You sure this thing was top of their chain?" Reese didn't turn. "Let it come," he said. "Let it taste what it's hunting." Race Tarkanen stared through the reinforced viewport as the predator took its first steps across the surface. Its limbs flexed unnaturally, recalibrating to lunar terrain. Even through layers of alloy, his skin tensed at its movement, too fluid to be instinctive, too erratic to be wild. It was studying. "Containment locks confirmed," said Dr. Halrin, stepping beside him with the clipboard he never looked away from. "Environmental flow's been redirected. Protein vectors dispersed through corridors A through G." Reese nodded, not looking at him. "Make sure the temperature variation holds within the target corridor. If it veers left, I want it drawn back. Pulse, every 90 seconds. We could still pull out," Hallen offered, voice low. "There's time." Reese didn't blink. "You think this station was designed for mineral assay?" The other man hesitated. Reese turned. Thera 9 was commissioned under Project Echelon. This place was always bait. We've just removed the illusion. In the central command bay, machinery ticked and sighed, gears locking, vents shifting with forced drafts of cold air. The air no longer smelled of synthetic stabilizers. It carried traces of copper dust, recycled bone meal, sterilized fungal growth, a cocktail of scents designed to confuse, not comfort. A low chime signaled that Block F had completed climate rotation. The predator's path aligned with the corridor's new thermal slope. Reese stepped onto the central walkway, hands behind his back. Every corridor here had been mapped in behavioral stacks, pathways engineered not for defense, but for instinct control. Every light shift, every floor vibration, every recycled gust of atmosphere was part of a trigger lattice. Reese didn't need to fire a weapon. He needed to offer a suggestion so primal, the creature wouldn't question it. Dr. Halloran followed reluctantly. You really believe this thing is predictable? Race paused at the junction to vent Zone 7. The corridor stretched in a long arch, its walls lined with heat-dispersing tiles and scent injection nodes. At the far end, a chamber pulsed with gentle luminescence, designed to mimic respiration under low-threat scenarios. I don't believe, Race answered. I know. He knelt by the wall panel and unscrewed the front casing, exposing copper manifolds and fiber leads. With deliberate care, he adjusted the dispenser ratio, dialing the bait protein down by 3%. Any more and the beast might suspect it. Any less, and it wouldn't consume enough of the compound to matter. Halloran crouched beside him. What makes you so sure it'll keep moving? It's not a hunter, Riss said. It's a pattern-reactive execution engine. It needs stimulation. It doesn't process doubt, it reacts because its design punishes hesitation. He straightened. His eyes were dull, but the skin at the edges of his knuckles stretched white from the pressure in his grip. Give it data, he said. It becomes predictable. Give it purpose, and you can drive it off a cliff. In Sector D, air pressure equalized with a hiss that signaled readiness. The lighting dimmed by 2 degrees Kelvin, triggering the illusion of nocturnal shift. Reese's team had spent weeks programming the sequence. Now it was live. The creature breached the first bulkhead. Claws scraped across tile, leaving jagged grooves as it sniffed the air in twitching bursts. It moved like it was used to things fleeing. Here it found nothing but stillness and faint movement patterns calculated to echo prey within reach. It lunged at a heating pipe emitting rhythmic pulses and crashed into it, only to find synthetic rubber and a bait cartridge leaking synthetic hemoglobin. It consumed everything. Then it moved on. Back in command, Reese watched through analog overlays, heat distortions, motion echoes, pheromone trails. His eyes didn't follow the predator's shape. They followed what it chose not to notice. That was where the data lived. The thing thinks it's clearing territory, Kelv muttered from behind a half-shuttered panel. It's nesting. No, Reese said. It's spiraling. It doesn't know it yet, but it's being reshaped. Every corridor that followed featured variation, subtle, deliberate differences. Temperature flicks, air molecule weight shifts, trace chemicals mimicking immune responses. Some halls mimicked stress, others mirrored calm. The predator showed spikes of agitation where it shouldn't. Neural loops were forming. Metabolic rates jumped with each false kill. We're not baiting it anymore, said Halloran. We're rewriting its hunger. Reese leaned over the chart as the motion paths began folding inward. That's the point. On his wrist, the analog counter ticked time in full seconds. The next funnel point activated. A chamber began filling with recycled breath gases, filtered through exolung resin to imitate a panicked mammalian group. The predator changed speed. Its gait increased. Heart rate spiked. It's entering Zone 11, one of the assistants called out. Final corridor before chamber lock. Close all other routes, Reese ordered. Keys clacked. Mechanical latches fell into place. Reese turned and walked out of the bay. He stepped into a maintenance hatch overlooking Chamber 11, barely a meter wide, meant for crawl inspections. The heat radiating through the alloy grid under his palms pulsed in sync with the room's temperature calibration. Below, the predator prowled across the bait pool. Its back legs dragged slightly, digestive organs under duress. Its vision swam from the compound's neuroload, though it didn't know what pain was. Reese watched the thing lower its massive head toward the synthetic feeding tank. It sniffed, paused, and looked around. It hesitated, and then it fed again. He exhaled through his nose. We're not hiding, he whispered. You just don't know what you've walked into. Calv's voice crackled through the portable comm unit. It's inside the chamber. We have 60 seconds before it reaches the saturation limit. Begin countdown. Reese remained in the hatch, staring down at the beast as it tore into a laced carcass replica. Its tail thrashed, spraying fluid that fizzled against the wall's wiring sheath. It didn't notice the vents sealing behind it, It didn't react to the floor plate, locking its rear claws. Kel's voice dropped to a whisper. "Are we watching the creature?" Reese didn't answer. He looked down one more time. "You think we're hiding?" he said. "No. We're watching you walk into our freezer." The outer hull gave way with a snap like bone under pressure. The apex creature burst through the compromised section of Theranine substructure, claws flaring out to absorb impact. Dust and insulation fragments spiraled as its limbs flexed for orientation. It crouched, exhaled, and tilted its massive head toward the corridor's dead center. Two nostril ridges expanded. It tasted the air. Then it moved. Corridor 6 lit up from embedded floor panels, heat signatures fluttering across its flanks like panicked footfalls. The creature lunged after them, its musculature expanding beneath its synthetic dermis, every tendon calibrated for rapid adaptation. It followed the scent signature into the first bait room, an abandoned lab chamber, arranged with overturned equipment and empty boots filled with fluid-drenched gauze. The boots weren't human-made. They were part of the illusion. The creature pounced on one, jaws splitting wider than bone mechanics should allow, its secondary palate dragging the bait into a specialized digestion pouch. The compound worked instantly. It didn't immobilize, it destabilized. Reese Tarkinen adjusted the side dial on the analog scanner embedded in the control pillar. The display returned movement logs overlaid against temperature flow, updated every 4 seconds. His eyes didn't blink, his breath stayed level. Behind him, Kelv stepped in, carrying a portable stim tray and nothing else. "It's taken 3 decoy feeds," he said. "Digestive rate is well beyond expected model range." Riss didn't respond. Elv waited, then added, "We're risking exposure at this velocity. Should I prep the containment array?" Reese turned slightly. "Let it work. We didn't design a net. We built a staircase. If it's climbing, don't remove the steps." The creature continued through Corridor 7, tail dragging against the ground like a live wire. A noise to its left, mimicking a shallow exhale, triggered a sharp pivot. It rammed the paneling, tore through the bait cartridge behind it, and devoured the nutrient-rich pack in seconds. The compound within altered its glandular filtration without damaging tissue, only confusing priority sensors. It began to circle from the orbiting Varnock cruiser. Telemetry readings streamed across displays mounted on segmented bone glass. Commander Vorak stood with all 4 limbs braced, his posture unreadable. "They're not resisting," reported the comms aide. "No weapon activation, no thermal spikes beyond localized compartments." "Let it run," Vorak said. "The humans are always slower to react. This will be efficient." He gestured toward the feed. The creature's path formed a spiral. Not a pattern it had displayed before, but one that suggested environment complexity rather than behavioral failure. He logged the variation and continued observing. The creature entered another chamber, this one mimicking a cryogenic farm unit. Rows of dormant protein sacs gave the illusion of hibernating colonists. Warmth radiated in sporadic pulses. It ripped into the closest one. Inside, synthetic tissue embedded with canine gamma laced through a synthetic marrow compound that glowed faintly under stress. As the apex fed, its equilibrium began shifting. Its gait adjusted. One rear limb twitched uncontrollably before realigning. Reese recorded the movement manually. In the sub-level vent access, Halrin finished placing bait node 11 inside the filtration duct. Sweat beaded under his collar. The smell of the synthetic meat packs clung to his gloves, thick and salty, like spoiled broth under heat. He removed the glove and wiped his palm on his uniform, blinking as air pressure changed behind him. A light flickered on the far wall. The beast was near. He froze. Then it passed the duct, sniffing the airflow, recoiling slightly from the concentrated bait stream. Not avoidance. Reese's voice crackled over the wristband. "Stay low, it's hesitating." Halloran lowered into a squat, breathing shallow. His jaw clenched as the footsteps faded into the adjacent shaft. In the command nexus, Rhys pulled up the compound ingestion chart. 4 major exposures. Metabolic acceleration increasing beyond forecast curve. The apex wasn't weakening, it was destabilizing from the inside out. That was the goal. Chamber rotation complete, Calv reported. Zone 9 is aligned. You want it drawn in? Rhys shook his head. Not yet. Let it spiral. We'll know when it's ready. Calv, check the readouts again. It's starting to twitch. Rhys leaned forward. Good. The apex halted mid-run, tongue flicking from its lower jaw to probe a wall-mount panel emitting trace pheromone trails. Its claws scraped against the floor repeatedly, almost rhythmically, each drag faster than the last. Then it snapped at the air, biting nothing, then again, harder, into its own flank. The sensors marked the event as self-mutilation, a low-tier reaction under combat simulations, but unheard of outside aggression loop corruption. The creature had begun to attack phantom threats. The Varnock monitors didn't flag the behavior. To them, it looked like feeding frenzy. Their systems lacked the nuance of failure diagnostics. Rhys tilted his head. You see it yet? He asked. Cal squinted at the overlay. It's chewing on itself? No, it's misfiring. Motor coordination's being rewritten mid-stride. Is that from the protein compound? It's not from one dose, Rhys replied. It's from obedience. It doesn't realize it's consuming its instructions. At Corridor 10, the apex slowed. Its front limb twitched again, jerking upward, forcing its entire frame to lean against the nearest surface. Its breath came shallow now, its gills struggling to compensate for an organ misalignment that hadn't existed hours ago. Its sensors locked on to a flicker of warmth further ahead. Irregular, human-shaped. It lunged. The wall exploded inward as it collided with reinforced polymer. On the floor, another feeding pack coated with tactile data mimicking blood spray. It swallowed whole. Kelv leaned over the desk, hand flat on the surface. How long can this go before it realizes? Rhys adjusted the scanner again, tightening the focus. It won't. It's built to dominate. It doesn't understand withdrawal. That's the flaw. He watched the heat signature trace slide toward the final turn. The apex paused. Then it limped onward. Slower now, breath harder, motion guided more by drive than clarity. Rhys pressed a marker into the logbook with an audible click. You're not in a hunt, beast, he said coldly. You're in digestion. The apex beast staggered into Corridor 12, saliva trailing from its open jaw, nostrils flaring without rhythm. A low hiss escaped its throat, unintentional, unpatterned. One hind limb failed to complete a step, folding beneath its weight with a jolt that cracked the floor tile beneath. The limb didn't reset. It dragged. Rhys Tarkinen observed through the angled viewport built into the reinforced wall of Containment Sector 3. The overlay showed erratic circulatory surges, glandular distortion, and temperature misfires. The data didn't surprise him. He was already preparing the second stage. Begin scent pulse deployment, he said calmly. Across the corridor network, vent diffusers released new molecular streams, each carrying trace elements of apex hormonal discharge, layered with synthetic predator signals. The effect was meant to confuse territorial identification and fracture recognition loops. It worked faster than anticipated. The beast halted mid-stride, head jerking to the right. It spun toward the ventilation grate, claws raised, but there was nothing there. Just air, moving at engineered intervals. Then it struck, driving its talons through the duct panel and tearing it out in chunks. The exposed piping hissed back. The apex recoiled, growled. then lunged again. Inside the command tier, Kelv monitored the telemetry feed. Its ocular targeting just spiked into rejection range. It's misreading vent temperatures as prey clusters. That's a response loop, Reese replied. We're inside its threat filter now. It'll react to shapes, any shape. Even shadows? Reese answered with the next command. Deploy corridor phase lights. 30-degree shifts every 4 seconds. Down below, artificial lighting kicked into new cycles. Every bulb flicked at a different angle, forming patches of interspersed darkness and blinding brightness. The apex twisted violently, its eyes flicking in opposite directions. It charged into one wall, swiped at the glare, then wheeled around and began attacking its own reflection in a broken panel. It roared once, an uncontrolled burst of frustration that echoed down the containment shaft. The roar broke halfway through. It gagged on its own breath. Reese scribbled a note into the hard copy ledger next to him. Vocal irregularities detected, throat dilation incomplete, potential loss of exogill synchronization. Kelv leaned against the panel with his arms crossed. You're writing a journal entry while it's dismantling itself. This isn't panic, Reese muttered. This is feedback. Every movement burns a calorie bank it doesn't understand. It thinks it's hunting, but it's metabolizing poison. In the Varnock flagship's command chamber, the viewing lens distorted as static noise bled across the telemetry grid. The Apex's silhouette flickered across the motion track, but its posture didn't match prior sequences. Visual distortion increasing, reported the technician, likely caused by internal atmospheric surge or human thermal weapons. Vorak stepped forward, mandibles twitching. Have the humans launched kinetic deterrents? Negative. No weapon traces, no resonance signatures, no discharge. Vorak narrowed his eyes at the feed. The Apex's outer layer looked wet, like it had begun leaking through its dermal sheath. He stepped away without comment. Inside Thera 9's lower basin, the creature twisted again, smashing its forelimbs into the corner where no target existed. Its mouth dripped with digestive fluid, now tainted with bile. As it backed away, its own tail caught its attention. The motion triggered a predatory cue. It spun, bit down, and snapped the tip in half. The scream that followed shook the support railings. Halrin, watching from the secondary station, looked disturbed. It's trying to remove parts of itself. Reflex contamination, Reese said. The scent markers have crossed into its memory junctions. It doesn't know which body parts belong anymore. A second bite followed. It tore into its upper leg, leaving a deep trench across its flesh. Clear fluid pooled onto the floor. The beast didn't stop. It began gnashing at the shadows that crossed its back. Reese flipped the switch for containment lock A. The corridor ahead sealed. Within the sealed chamber, the walls closed into a narrowing wedge. The bait had vanished. No protein packs, no heat mirages. Only dry metal plates beneath clawed feet and flickering sensors behind transparent shield. The apex twitched again, tail half shredded, eye sacs swollen from misdirected blood pressure. It turned to the wall and rammed it. Once, twice, again. The sound of bone-on alloy echoed up the shaft. Vital signs, Reese asked. Kelv responded. Spiking inconsistently, one organ's compensating for another, digestive systems overriding muscle coordination. It's eating itself from within. Reese gave a brief nod and stepped back from the observation pane. We're done watching, he said. Prep the extraction team, neural dampeners, triage gel, bone anchors. You're going to harvest it alive? Halrin's voice broke for the first time. Reese met his eyes. We never intended to kill it. Death wouldn't teach them anything. Kelv swallowed. This was never about defense, was it? This is about translation, Reese answered. They send a myth, we send back an explanation. 10 minutes later, Reese stood beside the surgical containment chamber. The predator lay immobilized, muscles locked from internal override, jaws trembling under restraint. Gel conduits pumped sedative vapor directly into its gill structure. Electrodes wrapped around its neural axis, mapping impulse discharges as if logging instructions. The surgical team didn't speak. They worked under timed intervals, each incision measured by analog dials and thermal range bands. No computers, no uplinks. Race recorded manually. Subject entering saturation decline, reflex arcs deteriorating, non-lethal phase complete, behavioral compliance acquired. Kelv approached slowly, eyes fixed on the creature's face. "You sure this thing still registers external IMPA?" Reese stepped forward, placed a gloved hand on the holding frame, and looked into the twitching sockets of the apex's fading awareness. "This isn't a kill," he said. "This is collection." The apex flinched when the neural disruptor contacted the base of its spine. Not out of pain, its receptors were already too scrambled for that, but from misfired muscle responses, each spasm betraying its decaying reflex maps. It bucked once, nearly dislodging the limb straps, but Reese adjusted the impulse dial by hand. The twitching stopped. Only shallow, irregular breaths remained. Inside the surgical chamber, the team worked with the coordination of trauma veterans. Each wore sealed gloves layered with grip gel and hormone neutralizers. Lights shone at angles calibrated to mimic lunar glow cycles, not for comfort, but to reduce visual aggression in hyperreactive subjects. "Gland access," announced the lead technician, pressing a cold blade into the base of the predator's neck ridge. A hiss of vented tissue followed. The odor struck like rancid protein mixed with something bitter, overripe, chemical. Not one of the men flinched. The first gland came loose in less than 4 seconds. Reese logged the timestamp. "Second cluster," said the assistant, using forceps to extract the paired nodes from the creature's chest cavity. Each glistened in the containment tray, twitching faintly under residual nerve chatter. "They're larger than projected," murmured Halloran, hovering near the readout board. This thing's entire behavior matrix was driven by these. "Not anymore," Reese muttered, scribbling notes into a lined journal. "Fear is a product, so is rage. We're just reclassifying the shelf it belongs on." The apex's eye, still functioning, tracked the surgical lamp overhead. It didn't blink. It lacked the ability. Reflexes were burned out, corrupted by 3 days of forced consumption and sensory overload. The apex could register motion but not threat. It could see but not understand. Reese walked over to the spinal cradle, where the retrieval specialist had begun segmenting the vertebrae. The scalpel clicked softly as it passed through cartilage, revealing the core filament wrapped in glial nerve sheaths. "Take only what pulses," Reese ordered. The filament responded when lifted, subtle electrical discharges rippling through the fluid bath below. The harvested piece was dropped into a sealed canister marked for inert containment. It hissed shut with the soft click of a pressurized seal. "Camera Unit 2, called Kel from behind the shielded panel. "Log footage ready for transfer." Reese stepped into frame. He held up the canister, turning it slightly so the embedded data port faced the lens. "This is spinal segment 3 of your engineered predator," he said. "Harvested without resistance. No kinetic force used. No casualties. Full sequence available in embedded logs." He stepped back. "Transmit that to drone command." Outside the surgical bay, the drone launch platform had already been prepped. The delivery shell, a cold gray cylinder no longer than a travel case, rested atop the injection rail. On its side, the word "return" had been stenciled in 4 dialects, each denoting containment, not threat. Reese stood beside the launch panel as the rail engaged. The canister settled into place with a muted thunk. "Route it directly to their war table," he said. Kelv raised an eyebrow. "You want this to go straight to Varnock Command?" "They wanted to break morale," Reese said, tightening his gloves. "We're sending them certainty." With a nod, he activated the launch. The shell tore through atmosphere, riding a compressed gravitic arc toward the Varnock fleet with a delivery beacon locked to the warpath's comm grid. No human escort, no encryption, no broadcast. Just one object returning to its sender. On the Varnock flagship, Commander Vorak stared down at the cylindrical case that now sat in the center of the council chamber. No alarms had sounded. The object had bypassed their outer perimeter using civilian diplomatic protocols. Ones meant for research capsules, not threats. Inside the chamber, the case unlatched with a whisper of compressed gas. A spherical containment vial emerged, spinning slowly on its own axis. Beneath the translucent panel, a filament of the apex's spinal column floated, pulsing faintly with residual synapse triggers. Attached to the capsule was a drive. Vorak connected it to the viewing terminal. A screen blinked to life. There was no ambient music, no warning shot, no preamble. Footage played, the apex predator strapped to the surgical table, flinching weakly as glands were pulled from its chest. Technicians moved calmly without fear. Tools clicked. Nerves were mapped. Data was spoken aloud in measured cadence. The predator's breath faltered and resumed. The final frame froze on its exposed spinal sheath, half extracted, glistening under surgical light. Then the feed cut. The chamber fell still. One of the advisors hissed low in disbelief. They dissected it. Alive! Another turned to Vorak. That was our purifier. Our apex. What do we call it now? Vorak didn't answer. He stared at the floating tissue and felt a new kind of unease settle over his limbs. Not panic, not anger. Something else. Something he hadn't known in decades. Human, he whispered, doesn't mean weak. Back on Thera 9, Riss entered the debrief chamber. A board waited for him, half filled with sketches, notes, timestamps. He stepped past it and sat at the analog recorder mounted on the table. He clicked the mic. Subject contained. Neurological disruptions successful. Autopsy underway. No kinetic contact used. Behavioral data transferred. He paused, then added quietly, the target was never military. Kelv entered from the corridor, arms folded. Drone made it. Varnock intercepted. They know now, Reese replied. What do we do if they send more? Reese turned slowly, the edges of his jaw tight. They think they sent a god, he said. We sent back a sample. The Varnock High Assembly Chamber, once known for brutal consensus, had fractured into bitter silence as the footage played for the 8th time. No one spoke. The predator's frame bound to the surgical table, limbs limp, spinal tissue exposed, rotated in a slow automated loop. Data overlays flashed across the top in Terran script, labeling harvested organs, neural readings, hormonal collapse indicators. Each frame stripped another layer of myth. Vorak stood at the head tier, unmoving. His advisors looked away, some resting their claws on trembling knee joints, others closing their ocular lenses entirely. The predator was not victorious. It was pinned, stripped, filed into categories. End playback, Vorak ordered. The screen faded. A younger official to his left whispered, We shouldn't have opened that package. Another snarled back, We sent it first. Vorak stepped down from his pedestal. We called it purity. We made it divine. And they logged it under Sample 3. Outside the chamber, the unrest had already begun. On the planetary capital of Hernek Prime, civilian broadcasts flooded local comms. Some showed side-by-side footage, the apex vaporizing Goran outposts, contrasted with Thera 9 staff calmly documenting organ degradation. In others, Varnock footage showed the beast tearing apart drone fighters, while Terran audio overlaid terms like tissue stabilization window and behavioral feedback regression. A popular show on the Reloc channel titled its headline, Godhood Dissected, the Day Earth Turned Our Apex into Homework. Riots followed. Outside the consulate square, thousands protested. Slogans painted onto biosheets, calling for military reform, intelligence resignations, and immediate cessation of all Apex production. In sectors where the Apex had once been paraded as a deterrent, statues were defaced, splattered with nutrient gel and ash. One protester, captured in a high-circulation clip, shouted into a holocam, "If the humans can tag and store our gods, what does that make us?" Inside the strategic war room aboard the dread carrier Cern Vexil, Varnock General Sartoon slammed a clawed hand into the tactical array. "We launch 3 more, he barked. "Simultaneous, no announcements. Send them to colony bands, Theta, Julis, and Ram." "But, Command," an aide began. "I don't care," Sartoon cut in. "We need to erase the doubt." Another advisor stepped forward. "And if they catch them too? What if they don't fire again?" Sartoon looked at the screen. 3 capsules were already queued. Each held a new predator strain. Variants with adjusted adrenaline modulation, memory dampeners, enhanced motor responses. "And we deny them footage," he said. "This time no drones, no observers. We erase the evidence either way." He activated launch. On Thera 9, Reese sat in the sterile review chamber, surrounded by smell of oxidized fluid and sterilizer residue. Behind him, the footage had already been packaged into secondary dissemination bundles. Kelv entered, carrying a portable archive unit. "We just got a redirect signal from deep orbit." "Let me guess," Riss replied without turning. 3 new drop capsules. Kelv nodded. "They're panicking," Riss said. "They're not trying to win, they're trying to reset the narrative." He stood and walked to the side panel. Behind a reinforced screen, preserved Apex tissue floated in chemical suspension. He tapped the glass, watching it twitch faintly. "Should we respond?" Kelv asked. Reese exhaled, then walked to the logboard and flipped through the last 6 pages of behavioral documentation. "No." Kelv blinked. "Nothing?" Reese didn't stop moving. "Send the footage again. Just edit it. Show the part where its tail fractures from stress loops, then splice in the gland extraction, end with the spinal nodes still twitching in the tray." Kelv tilted his head. "That's not retaliation." Reese looked up. "As from Within 36 hours, the footage rebounded across interstellar networks. Terran diplomatic routes didn't carry press releases. They carried case files. The imagery bled into every known quadrant. On Kalort stations, a satire series released a musical short depicting Varnock generals trying to reattach Apex limbs with chewing resin. The phrase Sample 3 entered common speech. On Pyrrhic colonies, it replaced familiar. Across 22 star systems, trade councils voted to suspend joint operations with the Varnock. Their fleets no longer inspired assurance. They inspired questions. Military analysts, once eager to report Apex dominance figures, now began opening broadcasts with side-by-side comparisons of Earth surgical logs versus Varnock training footage. One showed a technician calmly measuring adrenal gland diameter, while a still image of a Varnock commander shouted orders from the previous year's campaign against the Drosh. Overlaid quote, "One studied it, one worshipped it, guess who won?" Vorik sat alone in the auxiliary chamber beneath the High Council. News feeds played silently. Footage of the Predator's failure hadn't slowed. In fact, new edits emerged hourly, each sharper, more clinical, stripped of metaphor and grandeur. He reached for a report on the Theta capsule deployment. Lost contact. The Julis strain? Rerouted. The third? Gone. No return ping. He looked to the wall, where an old rendering of the Apex prototype hung. Its jaws stretched across the canvas, mid-roar, painted as if it were declaring eternal dominion over lesser species. Now it looked like a scream without purpose. An aide stepped in and whispered, "We have confirmation. Earth just published the intake footage from Hollister Lab." "Hollister?" Vorak echoed. "Yes, they labeled it as livestock." Vorak closed his eyes. "What did they name it?" The aide hesitated. "Nutritional Sample 4. He didn't speak again. On Earth, inside the Administrative Sciences Archive, Reese finished typing the final entry into the file marked Echelon Behavioral Review, Apex Subset Alpha, Varnock Origin. He saved it, then walked to the containment gallery. There, under Stasis Field 7, the creature's harvested spinal core sat beside the extracted fear glands, each neatly tagged, weighed, and sealed. Kelv stood behind him, arms crossed, brow furrowed. I didn't think they'd send more after the second wave. Thought they'd at least pretend to change strategies. They never had one, Riss said. They relied on spectacle, and we broke the script. Kelv leaned in. How do we label this historically? Reese considered the question, then gestured toward the gland rack. You feared a predator, he said flatly. We labeled it lunch. The object breached Earth's upper orbit with a jagged wake of heat trails and ceramic debris. Tracking stations along the equatorial shield flagged it under class trespass protocol. Non-human, non-registered, and descending fast. Its trajectory mirrored that of an impact payload, though its signature didn't match anything known from Terran or Allied arsenals. Inside Orbital Port 7A, Chief Handler Grom Vassell adjusted his visor and glanced at the readout again. Another Apex capsule, he muttered. Behind him, his deck crew had already stopped loading the recyclable cargo pallets. One looked up from the targeting screen, knuckles pale. Should we alert strategic? Vassell leaned closer to the thermal readout. It's not hot enough for active drop, no warhead charge. It's old, crude. This isn't an attack. This is desperation. The object began braking far earlier than a real weapon would. External fins deployed, not weapon vanes, but stabilization gear. That sealed it. Patch the right type hauler grid, Vassell said. I want a redirect drone up in 10. The cargo handlers scrambled. Inside the orbital catch platform, the Apex capsule slammed into the netting cradle with a deep groan of alloy on carbon supports. Hydraulic anchors clamped shut. The hull didn't spark. It cracked. Age fractures along the launch seams, residue trailing from shoddy welds. The payload had been rushed. Aboard the interceptor drone, retrieval technician Lynn Torek stood over the intake panel, his gloved fingers tapping the control deck with casual indifference. His nostrils twitched at the scent leaking from the vent duct. Organic decay mixed with protein sludge. He cracked the seal and peered inside. The predator was intact. Compressed. Its limbs were curled beneath itself, like it had been folded for storage. A respirator tube jutted from its throat, indicating forced stasis, not autonomous suspension. Recycling? The assistant asked over comm. Torek nodded once. Redirect to Hollister Biotech. This isn't an active threat. It's a biological crate. On Earth, at the Hollister Biotech Research Division, the reception dock pinged as the incoming manifest appeared. Unscheduled transfer/organic classification. Threat contained. Dr. Van Eyrel, Senior Archivist of Nutritional Classifications, adjusted his badge lanyard and waved for the loader crew. Push it to Vault 12, nutrient mapping, tissue index scan, then prep it for cataloging. A junior researcher beside him blinked. We're not studying this thing. Sure we are, Eyrel replied, but not in a weapons lab. It's food grade. The capsule doors opened with a stale hiss. The air carried heavy moisture like pond scum mixed with industrial cleaner. The predator lay motionless, still breathing. Electrodes clung to its skull. A fluid leak dripped slowly onto the floor, forming a dull smear across the intake tiles. Eyrel tapped the console. A label slid from the printer. Sample 4. He stuck it to the crate. The footage didn't stay on Hollister's internal servers. Within 6 hours, clips had already leaked. The Apex was shown being uncrated by a technician chewing dry gum. No weapons team, no security protocol. just a biology tech with a lab tablet and a shrug. The label on the crate was the clearest frame in every version of the footage. Sample 4, Nutritional Research Pending. Someone added subtitles. Then someone else added music. The Apex's sluggish breathing was timed to an upbeat Terran cafeteria jingle. Within a day, the footage looped across 28 species net streams under the title Lunchbox 4. The Varnock diplomatic channel sent an official protest. Earth never replied. Instead, the Terran Archive Board issued a public release. All Apex-class strains arriving on Earth will be routed for processing through non-combat biological utilities. The announcement came with a new memo directive for Allied stations. Apex materials were to be considered culinary trial grade. On the Varnock frontier colony of Rinvac Trine, military trainees viewed the footage in complete silence. The instructor tried to speak, his throat clenching before the first syllable left. A cadet in the third row stood, walked to the center panel, and tore down the Apex behavioral banner from the display. He didn't speak either. No one stopped him. In the military hall on Zarnex Prime, Admiral Jorak, once the architect of the Apex deployment fleet, now sat alone in his cold chamber office. His hand trembled over the playback control. He ran the footage again, the crate being tagged, the researchers yawning during transfer, the beast, compressed into a square too small for its anatomy, wheezing behind fogged glass. He threw the monitor across the chamber. When it shattered, he sat down again, hands flat against the desk. "Godhood doesn't fit in boxes," he whispered to no one. Rhys Tarkanen received the footage while reviewing blood toxicity charts from the last strain recovered at Thera 9. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He merely forwarded it to the Earth Military Ethics Board with one sentence attached. "This is what unearned fear looks like after cold storage?" Gelv, watching the footage on his end, nearly choked. "They really boxed it." Rhys tapped his stylus against the steel table edge. "They called it a final strike. And we logged it, labeled it, rerouted it with our trash." Kelv laughed under his breath. "We didn't just win, we made it boring." "No," Rhys said, "we made it recyclable." He stood, stretching his spine as the footage finished looping. Outside, Thera 9's external panels cycled down for rest mode. The work was over. The enemy was boxed, tagged, and returned without urgency. Rhys walked toward the exit. "It came to kill," he said, pulling the hatch closed behind him. It arrived as cargo. A month after the cargo crate landed at Hollister Biotech, Earth passed legislation without ceremony. No fanfare, no presidential speech, just a signed declaration embedded in the planetary database under Sovereign Bioreclamation Act, Section 14C. The contents were blunt. Species, Varnock engineered, Apex strain. Classification, harvestable organism. Application, nutritional, pharmaceutical, tactical study. Directive, non-combat containment preferred. No one in the room applauded. The decision wasn't meant to rally, it was meant to finalize. Across scientific circles, the case study from Thera 9 was renamed Case ID, Pradar 5, title, Predator Reduction Through Non-Lethal Overload. The footage was cut into modules for educational institutions, military academies, and interspecies advisory councils. Every section carried timestamps, annotations, and instructor notes. Every voice heard in the recording was calm, professional. No threats, no bravado, just procedure. On Earth's Eastern Sector Research Council, Rhys Tarkanen sat across from two internal review officers. He wore civilian grays. The command stripe had been removed. "The Council commends your work," said the elder director, sliding a sealed data pack across the table. "Effective immediately, your assignment to Thera 9 is concluded. You're being rotated to behavioral protocol design for long-range biological diplomacy." Rhys didn't touch the pack. "The station?" he asked. "Mothballed, scrubbed, designated as inactive. All data is already rerouted to classified archives. The facility served its purpose. And the Varnock? The second officer cleared his throat. They've requested a summit in the neutral corridor at Vel Class 40. They want assurances, not forgiveness. Roos stood, took the pack, and tucked it under his arm. Then they've learned something. No, the officer said. They've lost something. They're still figuring out what. In the Galactic Codex Assembly, a new entry appeared under Predatory Classification Amendments. Line 328-8F included a formal correction to species mythology, citing Earth's case study. Former Apex status revoked, pending further analysis, capable of containment via environmental manipulation and synthetic nutrient pathway disruption. High susceptibility to behavioral pattern inversion. Several planetary delegations requested the footage as required learning for Predator-class threat response. Others downloaded it out of morbid curiosity. And still more, to laugh. Inside the Grand Military Academy of Cerntak, a Varnock cadet named Vrek stood before the footage console. His claws twitched slightly as he watched the final minutes. The Apex's limbs bound, its nerves mapped by Terran probes, the labeling sticker pressed onto its flank by a technician who didn't even break stride. The instructor waited in silence. Vrek stepped back from the console, his breathing shallow. Why didn't they fear it? He asked quietly. His mentor didn't hesitate. Because they never saw it as a threat. Vrek turned. But it killed thousands, wiped out colonies. The mentor tapped the data panel and brought up the file index, showing annotations from Thera 9. They saw patterns. They found hunger. They read the code beneath the muscle, and when it stopped serving fear, they filed it under food. The cadet's voice faltered. So, what does that make us? The mentor stared at him for a moment, then said, That depends. Do you still believe in monsters? In the neutral corridor above Vel Class 40, the Varnock delegation arrived 22 minutes early. Not a single Terran representative boarded the discussion platform. Instead, the Varnock were handed a briefing packet by automated drone. Inside, a nutrient breakdown chart of apex gland proteins, molecular structures, digestion cycle compatibility, lab photos. They read it in silence. One Varnock general, stiff with insult, slammed the data pack shut. They want us to admit we sent food to a predator. An aide corrected him. No, sir. They want us to understand we're not the only species capable of manufacturing fear. Reese watched the summit replay from his new post, overseeing containment procedure models for off-world xenobiotics. His quarters were smaller now, quieter, more isolated. He preferred it. Kelv pinged him via direct console. The message was short. They're starting to rewrite the archives. Apex strain now listed under agricultural compounds. No longer a weapons-grade organism. Reese replied with a single word. Valide. At the outer edge of the Kodari Loop, a traveling broadcast merchant sold documentaries to independent colonies. His bestseller was a looped, 22-minute feature titled, When Earth Dissected God. Viewers tuned in to watch surgeons calmly weigh predator lungs, to laugh at the tape label, to quote the final data entry, Sample 4 research complete. Flavor profile, neutral, high protein. The merchant made no edits. The raw footage said more than any caption could. On a relay satellite once used by the Varnock military for field command, the screens now displayed a single static file, a frame of the apex in its final state. Below it, a message added later by an unknown operator. We taught fear, Earth taught instruction. The terminal shut down 20 minutes later. No one restarted it. And across Earth, no banners were raised. No statues were built. Thera 9 remained locked. Reese walked its empty halls once more before its systems were powered down. He stood at the same control node where he'd first tracked the creature's descent. He pressed one key and watched the corridor lights cycle one last time. Kelv stood nearby, arms folded. Feels like it should be louder, Kelv muttered. Reese didn't look up. That's the mistake they made, he said. They thought power came from noise. He walked out, footsteps echoing off the sterilized tile. As the doors sealed behind them, the lights dimmed. And across the stars, what once hunted now fills the pantry. Would you label it a monster or log it as lunch? Let us know in the comments. Hit like if you enjoyed Earth's calm revenge and subscribe for more strategic HFY.